I greet you on this 57th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, or Jobs and Justice. I greet you on this, the 65th anniversary of the death of Emmett Till. And I greet you on this, what would have been 2 days before the birthday of Chairman Fred Hampton, who was assassinated. My name is Stefan Bradley, and today I'll be lecturing on the role of the Black community in the 2020 election. And the title of the lecture today is "It is Our Duty to Win." I take this title from the Assata Shakur statement where she says, "It is our duty to fight, it is our duty to win." I make the argument that it is our duty as Americans, it is our duty as the people to rescue democracy at a moment when the democracy is in peril. Now, the way I see it, for many African Americans, the problems of the community seem to be the solutions for some politicians who argue that the way forward ought to be law and order, that the way forward should include contracting the democracy rather than expanding the democracy. In these unfortunate times, there is the danger that some of these politicians might work to hurt the democracy, not help the democracy. Now, one of the ways towards winning is to face this nation's history and to face it squarely, which is not easy, and we have to face the way that African Americans have been treated in this democracy and how African Americans themselves have inserted themselves into the democracy. So if we're looking squarely at the history, we have to take account for the fact that African Americans, and when I say African Americans, African American men didn't get the right to vote until 1870, during what we call American Reconstruction. And so African Americans went to the polls with panache and pride in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, or as you could see in their uniforms, to cast their ballots. Now, I especially want you to pay attention to the brother in the uniform there, because I want to disabuse you of the notion that somehow freedom or somehow the vote was given to Black people. No. Abraham Lincoln didn't hit Black people with a wand and say, "Now you're free." No, Black people fought for those freedoms. They fought for their American freedom rights. And they fought for this nation. And so remember that. But I mention voting in particular because ever since Black people had the right to vote, there has been voter suppression. So in and after Reconstruction, there were people who showed up to the polls with rifles to tell Black people that you should vote this way and not that way. Of course, there was the rise of the Ku Klux Klan during Reconstruction. But it didn't take just the Ku Klux Klan, because there were other ways to suppress the vote, which is something that people are very worried about today, especially concerning the mail service. So one of the ways they used to suppress the vote was poll taxes, actually charging Black people to vote when there was very little specie to go around the South. That is money to go around the South, and Black people had very little money saved up, but they were charged to vote. Some people make the argument that voter ID laws are similar to poll taxes. Other ways of doing it were more insidious. For instance, the grandfather clause, which stated that you are more than welcome to vote so long as your grandfather was eligible to vote. Now, clearly, there was one population whose grandparents weren't eligible to vote. So this was a racist policy. And so in America, this has been kind of the history, the trajectory of Black people's participation in the democracy. The Black people had to struggle and fight and scratch at every step to participate in the democracy. So Black people were largely removed from all of the positions that they gained during Reconstruction. Now, to move us forward, freedom, what does freedom look like? Freedom is the right to be. Freedom is the right to exist without having to worry about intimidation and violence. Violence was one of the main tactics used to prevent Black people from exercising their freedom rights. Here you see an image, here you see an image of Emmett Till. Emmett Till on the left, the top left. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy who went to Mississippi to visit his family, and he ran afoul of the racial etiquette of Mississippi in that he had the nerve to talk to, some say perhaps even flirt with a white woman. Now, typically pictured are these two white men on the top right, Roy Bryant and J.P. Milam, and the wife of one of these gentlemen who Emmett Till had supposedly flirted with. She later apologized for having Emmett Till killed. Now, what did Emmett Till look like when he was killed? He looked like the picture on the top left. He was unrecognizable. They tied him to a cotton gin fan. They beat his face out and they shot him in the face. And they threw him in the Tallahatchie River. When a memorial was put up of Emmett Till near Money, Mississippi, where he was killed, these modern day Americans use their rifles provided and protected by the Second Amendment to shoot up the memorial and to pridefully take pictures in front of their handiwork. This is America. This is America. And this is why it's necessary to vote. So we were talking about the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Okay, freedom, of course, had something to do with the vote, but freedom also had to do with the ability to make a living in America. I show you this particular picture because I wanted you to see. This. The gentleman on the left of your screen. His name is Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin is one of the underappreciated Americans in history. Bayard Rustin, as you can see, was Black. You could tell. By his beautiful little afro there. He was Black, he was a pacifist, he happened to be gay, and he happened to be Marxist. So essentially, Bayard Rustin was an enemy of the American state in 1963 when he helped to organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. He was a lieutenant of Martin Luther King Jr. And taught him a great deal about nonviolent passive resistance. 250,000 Americans showed up to Washington, D.C. to protest for their civil rights. At the same time, Malcolm X called for Black people to concentrate not just on their civil rights, which could be granted by the United States, but rather their human rights, that America wasn't treating Black people as though they were human, as though they had a right to live, to exist, to breathe, and to be. And this is important that we recognize that Black people, their freedom rights have been challenged at every step. And so let's talk through the idea of economics and what that means to the Black community. In 1963, we're talking employment rates right now. In 1963, the Black unemployment rate was 10.9%, which is 1 out of every 10 Black people was unemployed. A little bit more than that. 1 out of every 10 Black people was unemployed. Now, that is incredibly high. Incredibly high. There's no doubt about it. Just ask anybody. That's incredibly high. The white unemployment rate was at about 5%. And even at the height of Trump's, of the current president's administration, the unemployment rate in America was at about 5%. And so that was really, really good. And for white people, that was good at the time. Fast forward to 2020. One of the things that you have to keep in mind as we're fast forwarding, though, is that the Black unemployment rate has always been nearly double that of white America. And that's something that you should bear in mind. that in terms of wealth, in terms of earnings, in terms of the ability to function in society, Black people haven't had the same opportunities as white people. Yet and still, they have participated in the democracy and done their share to save America. In 2020, the Black unemployment rate is at 15.4%. 15.4%. That is remarkable. Remarkable. That is one out of every six, a little bit more than that. One out of every six Black Americans is unemployed. The white unemployment rate is at 10.1%, and America is at crisis at this point. And so what we're talking about is the ability to feed families. And when we're talking about the good life in America, you need several things. You need a job, you need education, you need health. You need these to function. You need access to the democracy. You need all those things to function. What we're seeing here is some of those pillars are being whittled away at, are being challenged. I just mentioned health. Health is crucial. Health is the baseline for good life here in the United States and everywhere. Health is a human right. What we're seeing here, I'm showing you on the left, hospitalization rates per 100,000 people associated with COVID-19. COVID-19 has affected the Black community in ways that outpace the effects on the white community, and this is apparent from these charts. You see that in terms of hospitalization rates, 46 out of every 100,000, 46 white people out of every 100,000 people are hospitalized with COVID symptoms. Okay, here you will see that 213. Just look at the disparity between those numbers. 213 African Americans out of every 100,000 are hospitalized with COVID-19 symptoms. In the Latinx community, you see 205, typically, around 205 out of every 100,000 people are hospitalized with COVID-19 symptoms. If you look to the right of that chart, you can see the death rates, and this tells a story in and of itself. The death rate from COVID-19 symptoms, from COVID-19, is more than double that of white Americans and double that of Latinx Americans. Some people make the argument that this informs the response of the current administration to the COVID-19 crisis, that Black people are dying at more than double the rate of white people. Now, health has something to do with some pre-existing factors, and Black people have higher rates of asthma, in part because of where Black people live and the environment in which Black people live, which has bad air quality. Black people, because many Black people live in places where there are food deserts. The kinds of food that Black people eat lead to other health indicators. And so this is a way of marginalizing Black people, and this is what's at stake with this 2020 election. Clearly, it's dangerous to be Black in America. It's dangerous to be Black in America. And so I feature these images because you need to know these images. These, when we're voting, these are the people that you will want to keep in mind. On the top left, you'll see Breonna Taylor, who died because police executed a no-knock warrant and shot her dead in her apartment after busting in to her apartment. On trial should be no-knock warrants. Is that constitutional? Is that what's good for the democracy? To the right of the picture, on the top middle there, you'll see Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake was recently shot in the back 7 times by a police officer who was holding on to his shirt. Shot in the back 7 times in front of some of the children you see in this image is very difficult to talk about, because as you watch a video like that, you see uh, um, that there is the ability for law enforcement to act in such a way. Speaking of acting in such a way, if you look to the top right image, you'll see George Floyd. Uh, George Floyd, uh, George Floyd, we couldn't turn away when we saw images of Officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as George Floyd died in front of us. Below George Floyd, on the bottom right, you see Ahmaud Arbery and his mother. Ahmaud Arbery was gut shot by white vigilantes who believed he was doing something to an early construction house in Georgia. To the left of Ahmaud Arbery is Bokeem John, who, when a police officer came home to what she thought was her apartment, a white police officer came home to what she thought was her apartment, but was instead his apartment, she shot him dead in his own apartment, making a mistake. Another mistake that was made has to do with the person to the left of Jean, and that is Adetanya Jefferson, who somebody had called for a wellness check on Adetanya Jefferson. The police crept around the back of the house, and then looking through a window in the back part of the house, when Adetanya Jefferson heard stirring, she went to check and see what happened, and the police shot her dead in her own home. Shot her dead. And then to the left of her, Jefferson, to the left of Jefferson, you'll see Chadwick Boseman, and some of you will wonder, like, why is he part of this collection of images? This just happened. This just happened. Chadwick Boseman died of colon cancer. Now you're wondering, Bradley, what does that have to do with the 2020 election? What does that have to do with it being dangerous in America? Well, let me just explain to you that in terms of prostate cancer, colon cancer, liver disease, diabetes, Black people are leading in terms of race in all of these different ailments. And so healthcare is on the ballot in 2020. And this is why we should care. And this is why I placed him here, because Black people are dying slowly and dying quickly. No matter what, though, Black people are being traumatized. Now, why vote? Why vote? Why vote? There are reasons for voting. It is our duty, in my mind, to participate in the democracy. It is our duty to rescue the democracy. I'm voting, and this is a moment of personal privilege, I'm voting for the man at the top left, who is the father of Mike Brown. I'm voting for him because I didn't want his son to have died in vain. When he died, America had to take a look at the democracy. When Mike Brown Jr. died, America had to take a look at the democracy. And for the first time, many Americans started to figure out who the attorney general was, figure out who the prosecuting attorney was, figure out who the city manager and the mayor was, and figure out why voting is important. So I vote for Mike Brown's daddy. I vote for the person to the right of Mike Brown's daddy. And that's Mary Church Terrell, who, when the 19th Amendment was passed, could not vote. This African-American woman could not vote because she was African-American. Here we are celebrating the 19th Amendment right now. People are donning outfits and celebrating the right of women to vote. Well, Mary Church Terrell couldn't vote because she was Black. And that's how that works in America. I'm voting because of the gentleman next to Mary Church Terrell, who charged us to get in good trouble. This is John Lewis, who, along with Hosea Williams and so many others, were beaten viciously on the Edmund Pettus Bridge as they tried to march to Montgomery from Selma. To march to Montgomery from Selma to achieve voting rights, the voting rights that they had supposedly won in 1870. They were marching because of the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was at a voting rights rally and protected his mother. He was, of course, gut shot by a sheriff and killed. I'm voting for the person to the right of John Lewis, peace be upon him. I'm voting to the right of the person. I'm voting because of the person to the right of John Lewis. That's the daughter of George Floyd. I'm voting because I want a better democracy for her. I want her to be able to believe in American democracy. And we have to rescue the democracy for her. And last of all, I'm voting for the person on the top right corner, Fannie Lou Hamer, who is probably one of the best Americans who ever lived. Fannie Lou Hamer, when it was found out that she had an interest in voting in Mississippi in the 1960s, the early 1960s, lost the land that she had been sharecropping for years. Furthermore, she was arrested. And when she was arrested, she was taken to the sheriff's department or the county jail, where she was placed on a desk and was whipped and beaten until the law enforcement got tired and they called out a prisoner to come and beat her some more. I vote for her because she questioned, is Mississippi America? Many today are questioning when they look at lines where people have to stand for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Many people question, is this America? Some people make the argument, and it's a cogent argument, that that's a part of voter suppression. Some people make the argument that without the ability to vote by mail in the midst of a health pandemic, that's voter suppression. Some people question whether that's American. This is what's on trial with this 2020 election. I make the argument, and so many others make the argument, that it is our duty to fight and it's our duty to win. I'm calling on all LMU students, I'm calling on all LMU affiliates to exercise your right to participate in the democracy. It's never been more important than now. It's never been more important than now. And so I'm wishing you luck, I'm wishing the nation luck, and thank you for listening. Before I go, I wanted to show you a quick picture of what I imagine democracy to look like. I imagine democracy looking like my attorney general, looking like the gentleman with his fist raised in the left corner of your screen. That's Eric Holder. I imagine democracy looking like the young woman to his right, who is the leader of the Los Angeles Black Lives Matter organization. And she was chair of the Black Studies Department at Cal State, LA. The person right underneath her, David Turner, runs Brothers, Sons, and Selves, and he's a PhD candidate and an activist on the ground who's fighting for the freedom rights of Black people. The person directly to the right of him got a law degree and went down to Jackson, Mississippi to participate in the Malcolm X Grassroots Project that led to the election of the first Black mayor in Jackson, Mississippi, Chokwe Lumumba. The person above him was one of the first people on the ground during the Ferguson uprising. She believed that Black people's rights were being violated, and so she decided to do something about it, and she called me and I followed her out there, her and her peers. To the right, you see rearing anti-racist kids. That's what I imagine democracy to look like. That we don't just rear kids not to be racist, that we rear them to be anti-racist, to oppose racism. And finally, democracy looks like these women on the corners. On the bottom left-hand corner, you see these young students who take seriously their rights to be and to participate in the democracy. Those are LMU students who graduated. And in the bottom right corner, this tells the story for me. This was a street activist who turned protest into politics, and she ran for office. And once she ran for office, she ran again and became a representative to the U.S. House of Representatives, to the U.S. Congress from Missouri. Her name is Cori Bush. On the street, she used to yell, "Show me what democracy looks like." And I just like to say, in a moment of happiness, this is what democracy looks like. So you all take care. Thank you so much for your attention, and good luck this fall.